Hey, this is Beth, and this is my reflection for week 4 for 6103. So, sustainable entrepreneurship. So, this week we looked at the chapter from Catherine O'Brien's book, and I have a separate video where I answer a specific question you asked us about which social entrepreneur we most identified with, because the answer for that to me was very tied up into my week's work for my other 2 classes as well. So that will become part of, I'll link to that video, but it will become part of a kind of a different or a bigger piece of work. So to this week's work itself, I found a lot of what was in O'Brien's book familiar. And I think because it was referencing a lot of Martin and Osberg's 2007, which the Zhao article also referenced. So as I was looking at it, I was like, ooh, the very similar concepts of ideas into action. And then when I looked it up, I was like, ooh, they're quoting the same original study of entrepreneurship education. So that made sense. But I love the concepts that are reinforced in this. So the idea that entrepreneurs recognize a suboptimal equilibrium from page 67. So the idea that basically you see something that's not the way you want it to be, and entrepreneurs take action. So it was very clear in this article is the connection between entrepreneurship and action, which I really love. Again, as a big fan of bell hooks and Paulo Freire, and just taking action is where it's at for me. That's the transformative part of education. So on page 67, 68, I really appreciated the breakdown of the different kinds of entrepreneurship versus activism and social services, because I found that a little bit confusing. So I like the differentiation that if you're calling something entrepreneurial, and this is from page 67, 68, entrepreneurial, you're saying that it's aligned with financial markets and it's intended to create financial profit. Whereas when you're looking at social entrepreneurship, that's looking more for large-scale transformational benefit that accrues either to a significant segment of society or to society at large. So it's differentiating between entrepreneurship for capitalistic ventures, or necessarily for capitalistic ventures, versus entrepreneurship that's meant to benefit people more generally or more broadly, particularly if they're disadvantaged. So they state that social entrepreneurs target underserved, neglected, or highly disadvantaged populations. And that's from page 68 in the O'Brien article. But again, that's all referencing back to the Martin and Osberg article. So that's why it's reminiscent of the work from Zhao as well, where entrepreneurship is ideas put into action. So what I took away from this, again, that differentiation. So what's the difference then between an activist, a social activist, an entrepreneur, and a social service? Because I found myself thinking like, well, what do some things that I do, what category do they fall into? So I like the idea that social activists influence others to take action for social justice. And this all comes from page 68. So I thought a lot about influencers, which made me connect again back to my 5131 class for this week on digital citizenship. So in the performative aspect of what we put for ourselves online, and that connects to my other piece for this week as well. Social entrepreneurs, they say, take action themselves for social justice. The social activists are more like influencers. You're saying, hey, do this, but maybe they're not taking any action themselves, whereas social entrepreneurs are taking action for social justice themselves. And then social services, it says, are also taking action, but to work within the current status quo, so maintaining the current equilibrium. So the idea that if you're a social entrepreneur and activist, you're kind of an agitator of the system as it is, and that if you provide a social service, you're doing work the same way that a social entrepreneur does, but one of you, the social service, is acting within the current system, whereas a social entrepreneur is using the concepts of innovation, or what they kind of pull out, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship to further social justice. And I liked that this article particularly pointed out that some people that end up in the social entrepreneur category tend to want to just burn the whole thing down or like break the systems that they're in, because I identify very strongly with that. I would say at my heart, social entrepreneurship is where my brain is. And I do I always talk about breaking the wheel, burning everything down and starting from scratch, because I see a lot of systemic issues. So anyway, that was really interesting for me. I also like to differentiate between old and new entrepreneurship. And I think when I was thinking about the questions for this week, so yes, of course, I think students should be doing this. It's the key to social justice change. I think we don't explicitly teach it in our curriculum, although I will say a little bit maybe. In our elective curriculum, which is through 10, 11, and 12, the kids have to do a practicum project. And for their practicum project, it's got to be a public service, basically. So grade 10, which is the one that I teach, the elective class that I teach, your public service project has to benefit youth of your community somehow. In grade 11, it has to benefit your community. And then in grade 12, you're supposed to focus on global. But it's all about creating change for social justice is kind of how we frame it. I would say that's the class we do the best job of it. And I think also that speaks to the cultural connections that we have to the IQ values, so or being resourceful to solve problems. Basically, the concept of innovation or entrepreneurship, if you want to think about it this way, is inherent to Inuit culture. And I think, as they point out in the readings, it was innovation by necessity. So referencing back to Zhao. So, and I guess if we're going to use the terms as well, I think a lot of what I do in the school in relation to the work with LGBTQ youth in the school, and also in terms of period poverty, would be called intrapreneurship, from the Zoya and the O'Brien article. So from page 70, the idea that intrapreneurship is the application of entrepreneurial skills within an existing corporate or public sector organization. So I think I do a lot of intrapreneurship in my school. When we're thinking about how that mindset can benefit students in their personal and their academic lives, I think that's clear. So this process is basically problem solving, which I've said before, and I believe it strongly that this process of what we're calling innovation or entrepreneurship is very much just problem solving, looking around and saying, okay, if there's something that doesn't work well, how can I improve systems? How can I increase social justice? How can I make a healthier community? So to me, this all ties very much back into the concept of living schools. I'm not surprised that I've seen this stuff in Catherine O'Brien's work, because she's such an amazing proponent of living schools, and social emotional learning and holism in education and in people, which is the concept of Inwin or creating a healthy whole person. So I think it's obvious how that connects and why it's beneficial for our kids to learn this. I'd say the last thing that I would like to share is that the video, so the video that we watched from William Murray, I really took away from that video thinking about this topic, and I appreciated it so much, was just jump in. So that social entrepreneurship is different than regular entrepreneurship, and that it's less planned. It's the doing of things. So he says, just jump in, just start now. It's trial and error. And that concept of if you wait until everything is perfect, then you'll never take any action on anything. And I love that. So I say all the time in my work, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I get stuck in trying to do things perfectly instead of doing them at all, it's just pick a place to start, and the perfect is the enemy of the good. And that's kind of a phrase I use to remind myself that if I'm trying to do something perfectly or have all the answers, or share perfectly, or if I'm too scared of being an imperfect ally, because the work I do, education in Nunavut, is allyship work by definition, because I'm not Inuit. And if you live in a place of fear, then you're never going to get anything done. So I love that story he told of, if you're waiting for permits and do you have a spare house in your room? If you're trying to help women who need a safe place to stay, do you have a house in your room? Just do it. So I like the spirit of entrepreneurship from this, is really just kind of put up or shut up. If you see an issue, what's your idea to solve it? Get people together and just do something. It's better than nothing. So I think that's, yeah, the concept of action is really what I'm taking away from this.